Our presenters are Mr. Kurt Jackson and Mrs. Marcy Jackson, and they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves, but I'll read what's described in the booklet here on page 16. This session introduces 7 key competencies grounded in research and practical application using the P.A.R.E.N.T.S Life Skills Literacy and Leadership Framework. Participants will explore essential tools like attitude, teamwork, and co-parenting. Presenters Kirk and Marcy Jackson will share the Sharon Resch model for family restoration. I'd like to introduce this time's speakers, Mrs. Marcy Jackson, Mr. Kirk Jackson. Can you give them a hand, please? Thank you very much. Appreciate your attention.
Hi, we are back.
Okay, so we're good.
We have a cover slide, but I'll zoom into it. Thank you guys for coming. It's good to see you all. I'm sure you're having a wonderful time. This is our first time here, and I'm really glad to be here with all of you experienced practitioners.
I think so.
So my husband and I, Kurt Jackson, we developed a framework, and so we want to share that with you and share our experiences with you and give you some details on that. My background is in my graduate degree is in educational leadership, and my background is in workforce development and special education. And
I'm Kurt Jackson. Glad that you could join us. My background is in business management. I've done some work with a company called Safe and Sound in Maryland prisons, designed to elevate fatherhood. And so that is definitely a passion of ours, and we were inspired to write this book called Parents in order to help to uplift fatherhood, because it was definitely something that has been strategically attempted to destroy. So we want to make sure that we combat that with principles to help parents become better.
I think so.
so, P.A.R.E.N.T.S is an acronym, and we have it over here on the side. You can take a look at it as we go through. And it incorporates life skills, literacy, and leadership principles. And it is a competency-based framework. It's a research-based framework as well, and it is designed to inspire social change. The acronym is PROVIDE. P is provide, A is attitude, R is routine, E is educate, N is nurture, T is teamwork, and S is safety. And our target audience are organizations and institutions that serve parents and young adults. This is for young teenagers, 15, for example. Our children, actually, we've introduced the framework and they're teenagers, on up to adults who are older and want to reskill and reparent, what I call reparent themselves. This is a testimonial from Coach Alicia Smedley. Is anyone familiar with her? All right, good, yeah. She is an excellent correctional education consultant. And she says, as a national conference presenter for correctional education, I am always looking for fresh content for incarcerated students. The Parent 7 Skills to Reparent Yourself and Your Children Handbook and Curriculum is an excellent resource. The curriculum is strongly rooted in evidence-based principles, reflective exercises, and hands-on activities. All learning styles will be engaged when using this valuable tool. The most important feature of the program is that it's comprehensive and customizable. The classroom teacher will find a treasure trove of material for group or independent work, and the content is timely, diverse, and ready for practical application by the student. I will be recommending this program and support materials to organizations across the country. So I challenge you as we go through this presentation to see if indeed you see examples of what she actually testifies in this example. And hopefully we'll get a chance to introduce you to some of it, at least in this, 90-minute session.
All right, so some statistics. 1 of 7 kids in the United States experience child abuse neglect each year. That's by wwcd.gov. 52% of single mothers have never been married. 15% of sexual assault victims are ages 12 to 17. And 75% illiteracy rate among incarcerated individuals, and that was definitely our experience in the prison system, that most of the fathers, most of the men that we spoke to, they were not able to read past the elementary level. And we believe that that was a key to why they ended up where they ended up. And so that's why one of our principles is obviously education. They had never been read to as children when they went to sleep. And so when we read children's stories to them, they actually enjoyed it. These were men who, were fully adult men, but they were softened by hearing stories that they never heard as children.
And just that experience of having that nurturing moment to actually have that, and I think that was very helpful. So these were just a snapshot. You all are probably very familiar with a lot of the current and recent statistics and the history of illiteracy and some of these factors that have plagued families. And so this is the reason why we decided to embrace this framework.
All right. So why the bull? Why the ox? I do research in the language of Hebrew, and so when I look at the word in Hebrew for father, it is the word ab, okay, or abba, okay, and that word in Hebrew, it's a picture language. You know how you would see writings on caves and not letters, because letters are symbols. Pictures are actually real things. So they give you a clear message that even a child can understand. And so the first word or letter in the Hebrew alphabet is represented by an ox. And the ox was the strongest domesticated animal in the community, right? It did the heavy lifting. So it's very, very telling that the word father, the root of it, is a strong ox. The next slide, if you will, is the letter Bet, or some say Bayit, okay, and it represents a house. Now, what I've shown is a illustration of the temple in Jerusalem, which is a house. And notice the strength of this house. It's surrounded by walls, it's fully protected on all sides, right? And it's fully functional, able to do exactly what it was created to do without the interference from the outside. So when we look at the word for father, Abba, it means strong house, because the strength of the house is the father. And so when you take the father out of the house, you remove the strength from the house. And so how could Humpty Dumpty's house not fall when you took him out of the house? And one of the things that I have always believed is that right now this society is trying to reshape the cultural narrative of fatherhood under the guise of progress. Okay, and if something is perfect, you cannot progress past perfect. Okay, and the creator of fatherhood made it perfect. And so if we learn those principles perfectly, then we can obviously walk in them. And so father means strong house. And that's our message for the men. You have to get back in your house and you have to reclaim and restore the strength portion of your house. And that's not to say that women are not strong, right? But that men have a role in the house that is very defined, okay? And women have a role that's very defined as well. And the two complement each other, right? A false balance is an abomination, right? And so we need that balance in the house, and that's what's missing, okay?
If I could just add, so mother is Amma, right? And that means strong glue. You know, she is, because it's strong and the mem is water. And so that liquid is that glue that holds the house together. So it's just perfect principles from the very beginning, so many, many years ago, that all we have to do is find out, well, what was those? And then how do we then introduce it into quote unquote mainstream, if you will, right? To the people who need it. So that's the foundation of this framework. It's taking what was so old and so maybe some might say archaic, and then making it applicable to those who can absorb it. All right. So we have a little quote, and we try to make these are action words and verbs. We provide for our children and adjust our attitudes and routines while educating and nurturing with teamwork for safety. And you might come up with your own, and that's totally fine. But this is sort of literally, how many of you are parents? Good.
And obviously, everybody had.
Yeah.
Right? So it's relevant whether you are or not. You have the experience of either parenting or being parenting.
And so I'm glad you brought that up. So sometimes, like some of the participants we've had will say, you know, I don't want to go to that class. I'm not a parent. You know, I don't have any kids. And so we just remind them of what you just mentioned, and also just that it is parenting is sort of governing yourself. And so it's life skills, and everything is kind of can be absorbed and transferable, actually. So we have, as part of the curriculum, the most popular and the easiest way to access the material is through this workbook. It's a self-guided workbook, and it makes it very easy. You can read through it, you can do the activities. Ideally, you want to have a coach, a trainer, someone that can walk you through it and guide you through it, maybe a cohort, a small group. You can go through it together, but it is made to be walked through independently so that you can use it yourself. So the words are fairly simple. I think it's like 14, 16 font, so very simple. So there in it, there are self-guided scenarios. There's self-guided material. There are some scenarios, and there are self-assessments. So, what is your parents' life skills? So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I just want you to take a piece of paper and just give me an idea. Just going to ask you 3. Actually, it's in the, I'm going to ask you 3. And just tell me yours on a scale of 1 to 10. So I'm going to read a statement, and you tell me where you are. I hold an attitude of self-control by managing my anger and anxiety with mindfulness and joy. On a scale of 0 to 10. 0, not much. 5, kinda. 10, completely. Teamwork. Do is teamwork. I work collaboratively and positively, communicate with my child or children and co-parents. 0, not much. 5, kinda, sometimes. And 10, completely or very often. And I really like S, safety, the self-assessment questionnaire. I care for the mental, emotional, and physical health and wellness of myself and my children. 0, not much. 5, in the middle, or 10, very often. So the idea is through a self-assessment process, because all learning begins with examination of self. Where am I? So first we have to identify where we are in order to know where we want to go. Once you finish the framework, then you do another self-assessment, the same one, about 180 days later, to give yourself a sense of what did you learn, what did you change, and where you are. And that continuing evolvement of yourself is what will produce the progress. And obviously, if you have a coach or a mentor guiding you through this, then you're checking, you're setting goals, et cetera, around that. Okay? And in the app, I'm going to post the results. I did a little poll on some of these competencies, and I'll share with you at the end of the session what the results are. Next. I lost the clicker. So a little bit about what we learned from the cohorts. I'll just briefly go over this. I think it's very helpful. So 56% of the participants did not have a parenting plan. That would come under the life skills, having a plan, right? We always hear about the vision and the importance of having a vision so that we can prosper. 50% failed the literacy assessments and activities provided. Okay, and that's like vocabulary, spelling, quizzes, questions, such, writing assignments. 12.5% were able to recognize the cost in raising a child from infancy to 18 years. Now this data is coming from a few years ago, and the cost of living was $250,000 at that time. So yeah, I mean, you shriek. They were like, huh?
That's over the lifetime of a child.
That's a lifetime of a child.
Okay.
0 to yeah. Not an upfront cost, right?
0 to 18.
0 to 18. Yeah, how many of you have that just waiting right now? So, but that's important because that's where our basis for planning and financial planning we can start having those kinds of conversations. Okay. 37% of respondents self-identified as struggling with both anger and anxiety. The men, however, had a higher tendency to struggle with anger, and the women had a tendency to struggle with anxiety.
Right. And we believe that's because men tend to deal with things physically, right? Because we have a certain amount of power, and so we try to exercise that power to change the course of our direction. And so it makes sense that they would have a higher tendency and struggle with anger, which is a major part of a section that we talk about, which is attitude. Okay, 37% believe they have to be smart in order to be their child's education leader. In other words, they didn't feel like they were very educated, and they didn't feel like they could provide what their child needed. And so our goal was to show them that was not necessarily the case. 81% believe that both parents, not just one, the father and the mother, ought to nurture the child. So that was great to hear because that is absolutely true. 76, but in different ways, obviously, right? 76% felt completely frustrated about not being able to help their children or their grandchildren. And that fell under teamwork.
And just to give a little context, these were incarcerated participants. So you can see where the frustrations come from, not being able to help. And then obviously those conversations extended when we started talking about parenting plans and how we're going to address those things once we are released. Now that's another frustration because the relationships between the parents have been scarred. So it's redeveloping those relationships. Okay, so we're going to go through the competencies now. And I'll just give a brief overview. The PROVIDE encompasses planning, preparation, and provision. And so we look at it like there's a step, but you can't just provide. It just doesn't happen. You first have to have a little bit of planning, then you kind of prepare it, then you provision it. And so a lot of that, this is the area where we talk about SMART goals and help them to develop goals. This is where we put the workforce development piece, and we start to talk about career and job development, diet choices, meal planning. So all of those areas fall under PROVIDE. And this was, I just put a sample in here of one of the mothers in our sample. She said, I provide for my children by working. Also, I attend college in order to get a better career. I purchase a house so that my children can have shelter. I purchase clothing for the season so my children can have what they need and want. I provide healthy meals for my children so they will be healthy and not overweight. I teach my children right from wrong and educate them.
Wow.
Very, very, very good, right? Sometimes we think just because someone might not have great means that for some reason they are uneducated or, ignorant. They might be ignorant to some things, but there's a great intellectual ability to recognize what needs to be done. And that's basic. That is fundamental. You don't need a PhD for that. That's very fundamental. So if she can grasp that, we're halfway there.
Okay, so when we look at provision, providing or provision, the word itself gives you its meaning. Pro meaning forward. Vision is how you see things. So in order to have provision, you have to see things before they happen. Okay? Then you're able to have provision. Okay, and that comes from the three sights of vision. You have insight. Insight is something that's very challenging. It means something has come up unexpectedly, and you have to deal with it without having even thought of the possibility of it happening. And someone that's insightful is able to move quickly on their feet and solve the situation. And that is really a gift, not that many people don't have. Okay? Another sight is foresight. And foresight would be the closest to provision. It's the ability to look ahead, to see what's coming down the road, and to put things in place in preparation for what you believe is going to occur. Okay? And that would be foresight. Okay? Foresight. And that is a very, very important and blessed gift that many people don't have. Okay? People that have foresight tend to be misunderstood because no one can see what they see, because they see too far down the road, and they're like, no, computers, we just have, we're listening to news on the radio, right? Gathering and listening to news on the radio. Somebody comes along and says, well, we can do it and show a picture, right? The first form of communication, wireless communication, was prayer, right? And so from that vision, someone said, well, if I can talk to someone without seeing them, maybe I can make that a reality. Okay? And then we have the last and probably the most difficult portion of sight, which is hindsight. And hindsight may be 20/20, but it is extremely painful because now you're assessing what you didn't do correctly, right? And that means that if you don't change your situation quickly, you're going to remain in that pain. It's going to continue to circulate over and over and over again. So we don't want to rely on hindsight. We want to try to be insightful. We want to try to be living in foresight, right? But we may be relegated to being, to have to deal with hindsight as well. And it's always best to learn from the mistakes of others rather than to learn from your own, because then the pain is not connected to you. Okay, you're able to see someone else's pain and say, I don't want to go through that, right? Someone's father who's incarcerated goes and says, like myself, I grew up, I didn't have my father in my household. So I looked and said, I want to make sure I'm a part of my son's household. Okay, so that was a conscious decision. Okay, so that's a little bit about provide. And we talk about obviously the needs of food, clothing, and shelter, because those things are needs, right? Not wants, but they are needs.
Right. And this is also the area where we describe and we start to help people differentiate between wants and needs. That's really key, as you all probably know. Some things been so much a want, everybody thinks it's a need. And then you really start peeling back the layers. And that's the discovery that is performed in this conference here.
Okay, attitude. So attitude, we have anger and we have anxiety. You saw the, the questions and the poll, which showed you the struggle that men have typically with dealing with anger and the attitude. And the attitude, I look at the attitude and I substitute that first T and I put an L there. I get altitude. And your attitude will determine your altitude. Okay? A fancy word for altitude is trajectory. Is your trajectory going to be upward or is it going to be downward? Is it going to be forward? Is it going to be backward? And a large portion of whether it's positive or negative, it is your attitude, right? So if you've hit rock bottom, you look in the mirror and you say, what attitude have I projected to put me in this situation? And how do I need to change that attitude to elevate myself? Because you can't go lower than rock bottom. You can only go up from rock bottom. So it's a bad place to be, but sometimes it's the best place to be because now you are dealing in a reality where necessity is the mother of invention. So now you have to become, you have to have hindsight, right, in order to change things. Okay, and as you begin to elevate, you're going to develop being insightful. Okay, because it's a necessity.
And the next one is routine, the R, routine. And routine is order and time management. So that's very important. One of the activities we've done is help to develop schedules, daily schedules, planning, how to you have an event or you have somewhere you have to be, how do you, outline that? How do you prepare that? I have a video I'll show, but I'm gonna save it to the end just in case.
Okay.
It's a sample of a video where we gave a presentation on routine. Okay, but essentially, routine is really, really tough because, and I'm giving some away in the video, but routine is tough because if you've grown up not having one, and now you're an adult, and somebody tells you you need to have one in order to keep this job, it's like, So the idea is to help to redevelop those skills and then show them what it looks like for children. I don't know about you, but kindergarten was the best grade because that's where you learned everything, very simple, but those structures put in place were very key. How to take care of yourself, how to put things away, how to stay organized. And so that's what routine is about. So I'm gonna move on. So that's the Train the Trainer video. So in our Train the Trainer, our idea is to model the facilitation of this for anyone who wants to teach it, because that's where we feel like you're going to get the most out of it. So this is an example of a video where we did a training with an online training. And the idea is the Trainer would be co-facilitated. We think it's best if there's a male and a female perspective in the training. It was okay when I went and I trained the women in some of the prisons, but it's not cool. I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's just not the best to just show up in a room full of men and tell them how they can be. It's just, they appreciated what I shared, but it was great when my husband and I could come in and he could share, and when they raised something, I could give my perspective and he could give his. And they could see both, right? But they could have some ability to have what he said resonate with them. And I think that's fair. So I didn't want to introduce that. So that's why I think it's helpful. And it's not to say we can't teach, it's not to say we, but it's just to give them that opportunity to have that exposure to perspective that they might not get from female individually. So that's that. Okay, and then educate. This is my favorite one, probably because I'm an educator. But educate is very important, and it's so the E from this, a whole lot has come from E. There's a whole nother coaching program called Educational Leadership for Parents. And what that does is it basically takes the education acumen and puts it in the hands of parents so that they can then become the navigators of their child's education. Instead of relegating it to the school or someone else. Hey, I can navigate my child's education. I don't have to be an A student, have, gotten a certain degree, but I know what's right. I know what I want them to learn. I know how they learn. I know I want to make decisions on my child's education. And so there are 7 steps to becoming your child's educational leader. Learning. So we want to inspire learning, continuous education. Thank you. I used to work is really important, and it's a lifelong learning process. So we want them to enjoy learning, and so that's really important. And then I spoke to the literacy component. And so education is not just academics. There are all kinds of skills. It's life skills at home. It's faith. It's really important that we're educating them. And then obviously we're having conversations about what does that look like between you and your co-parent. And what kind of school do you want the child to go to? One parent might want this, the other parent might want this. I want my child homeschooled. I want my child to go to this school. I don't want my child to have an IEP. I do want my child to have an IEP. Like all of those conversations come into now that co-parenting conversation, especially around education. And there is an article on our website. It should be there, but it talks about co-parenting and education. Okay. And okay, if education is my favorite, nurture is my second favorite, or sometimes they flip-flop. But nurturing around behavior and discipline. So nurturing and affection are 2 different things. And so we want the parents to understand that you can nurture, it includes affection, it includes discipline, it includes quote unquote behavior management. All of that is all part of it. And so it's really important we talk about abuse prevention. As you all know, there are many parents, fathers, and mothers who are behind bars. If you don't know, there are many who have been in trouble before abuse, or unfortunately for murder of the child. Some intentionally and some by accident. This is a very tough subject. When you introduce this, you can tell in the room, who's been impacted. So a lot of this work is teaching, you're opening some wounds, so you have to be willing to close them as well. So when you go into a session, and we talk about this, we build this into the train the trainer, because that's really important. Like, we don't want to just go in just teaching a whole lot of stuff and ripping off, old history and then leaving the group not able to recover from that. Nurturing gaps, behavior alignment, discipline, decision making. And so Shelton, his vision of fatherhood, he said, the type of father I'd like to be. Someone who is compassionate, yet firm, understanding, and yet instills the rules, and it's just overall loving. Like, he can see that. That's what he wants to be. So we've got to help him to actualize that, to bring that into being. And can you imagine all the obstacles around him from keeping him from being this? And that's all he wants to do. I just want to be compassionate. I want to be firm. I want to be understanding. I want to be loving. And so that's a great place to start. Mm-hmm.
Just a fun fact, Hebrew word for nurture is cool. Okay, cool. it's cool to nurture. And the picture of that is a hand and a shepherd's staff. A hand and a shepherd's staff. Okay? Because despite what we've been bombarded with, that children should be able to make their own decisions at 5, we understand, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart. And so you have to have that guiding hand, which is the nurturing. Okay, the nurturing involves discipline, okay, which is a part of routine and a part of all of those things that may not seem pleasurable to us at the moment, but when we look back, we realize how blessed we were to have that guiding hand of our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers and grandfathers. That's missing now, right? Because you have people who are at the age of motherhood, but they're already grandmothers, right? So they never had an opportunity to actually learn how to be a mother, let alone a grandmother. And so it's a cycle that, perpetuates and continues on. So it's very important that they learn these skills so they have something to pass on to the generations to come.
Oh,
I'll
okay, good.
Teamwork, communication, and relationships. Robert's vision of fatherhood, family first. My goal as a father is to build a stronger foundation for us all. To do this, I will get everyone on the same page so we can learn to support, respect, love, and be honest with one another. And I will also assist in educational projects and help older ones find and maintain employment.
I just want to Robert was a mature participant. He was one who, really spoke up a lot, was really participatory and mature.
He was literate.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, yeah. So I think, and he had children, up and down in ages. And so when he's saying, the older ones, he had older ones and he had younger. And so he really appreciated, we had to talk about how to get agreement. I mean, negotiation is not a high level word. It's real in co-parenting situations. And when you are, and communication, what things to say, trigger words, like, you might not want to say that to her. There's a better way. And that's where the balance of the facilitation comes in, because you can share different ways in which you might communicate something and give your audience, because everybody's unique and different, and everyone wants to develop their own style. Negotiation, problem solving. We know that that's probably one of the biggest competencies, lack of problem solving that exists among individuals who are struggling. Roles, and that problem solving, a lot of that problem solving comes from lack of, not having the problem solving skill comes from lack of nurturing, because you don't have that example that spent time and you could look after and say, oh, that's how they solved that problem. You didn't see that, right? You saw people solve problems by what? By hitting, by fighting, by yelling, by screaming. And so that became what you were nurtured in. So problem solving is key, and roles. We talk about traditional roles, and we can't escape traditional roles. That was a fact of history. We can't change that. And then we talk about what your roles are now and how to operate in your role. And that's also a little bit of what we teach them is just sharing our roles and how sometimes our roles change. Somebody has to work nights, somebody works days, somebody is in charge of education, somebody's in charge of going to the doctor. We've been through that and those different role changes. Okay, so like he's sports injuries. I'm, when you get sick and you got a cold or something, but if you fall and you hurt yourself,
he's the man.
He's the man.
And that balance is just extremely important. it's invaluable because you need both perspectives. Like she was explaining, when the brothers would say certain things, she was able to give the perspective of how their counterpart would probably feel or respond to that, to the way, not what they said, but even how they said it. And so teamwork is essential. Two is better than one, for they have a sure reward for all of their labor. How can someone be warm by themselves? See, coals don't function alone. One coal can't burn on its own. It only is able to burn when it's connected to another coal. And so we try to stress that balance and that teamwork is essential, and it may just be the missing element in your child's elevation. So regardless of your differences, it's about the betterment of the team as a whole. Okay. Yeah, so it's innate in us when we are babies. We're born selfish because it's necessary. You have to have that food from your mother's milk in order to survive. So you're designed to scream at the top of your lungs until you get what you want. And you don't care if she hasn't had but 1 hour sleep that whole week. You got to get me meat. Okay? When you need to be changed, you've got to make sure you communicate however you need to communicate that you need to be changed so you don't get that diaper rash. So it creates that example of being selfish, only thinking of yourself. And you have to be retaught and re-educated that was a season. It was appropriate for you to be selfish during that season. But now, we're no longer in that season. Now you have to learn to consider others. You have to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you don't learn to do that, you're going to experience a lot of pain because people don't like people that only care about themselves. And if I'm doing all the giving and you're doing all the taking, at some point it gets over. And so teamwork is an essential part of parenting. And when it's not done properly, the children suffer. Not sometimes, but always, because they're competing. Okay? They're competing. And parenting is not a competition.
Okay. And then the last one, and I think it's also important to know that we also stress, because the family dynamics are so varied, it may not be the two parents that are the co-parents. It could be the father and his mom, right, and the grandparent, or it could be an aunt, or it could be a friend. But all the principles are all still the same. And then the last one is S, safety. And I'll just say that the element of safety, the reason why it kind of, I'm glad it's at the end in a sense, because it is a key cog, because the whole, as you ask any parent, they just say, I want to love my children and keep them safe. Like that's what we live for every day. Wait a minute, don't, make sure you have a coat on, don't go too far. All of those kinds of things is all about safety. And so this is where we talk about security and health. So it goes beyond, obviously, when you're little, putting the plugs in, right? There's safety things we do as babies, but as we're older, there are safety things that we have to look out for. Monitoring who our children are hanging out with, things like that, right? Health, health care, and all kinds of the whole scope around the child's health. reproductive health, etc. And those are all the areas that are under safety.
Right, and obviously, when you think of a safe, you think of something that is obviously protected. Okay, and the parent's job is to safeguard, to put up safeguards around their precious creation. Okay, in order for it to be able to someday also bring forth a creation. Okay, so that the generations continue. Because if you don't safeguard your children, then your legacy dies with you.
Right.
Okay, and so safety is something that you have to look at from all areas, in terms of, like she said, who do your children keep company with? What are they watching on their instruments? Right, on their, it's called a device.
That's good.
It's a device. Okay, so you have to be careful when you're dealing with a device.
Right.
Okay, and so we talk about that extensively, obviously, in the book, and we try to give real life examples that people are going to be able to relate to, and we pose the questions to them, and they're able to take that assessment. And obviously during the training, we're able to take individual questions and give examples how they might consider doing it a different way. Yeah.
Right. And also exposing, so it has to be obviously a safe space because situations are going to come up that are shared based upon what happened to them when there wasn't safety present. So the reason why it's life skills in the context of parenting is because these life skills are applicable things that we all need, but we want to give the participants an opportunity to look at it from the lens of a child because it's simple, right? If we look at it from the context of a child, okay, this is simple, but okay, now I'm looking at it in my mirror. Now I get to apply it differently in the same way, but for me as a grown-up. And so it makes it easier to absorb. Okay, so we mentioned the train the trainer, and essentially we're the trainers, and we provide a training, 9 hours, 2 or 3 days, and in the toolkit, obviously, their agenda, activities, assessments, certificates for the participants, and obviously certificates for those who will do the training, so that you are, an official trainer. And there's a guide and handouts, some videos, and then the workbook like this. And I think there's also a couple other things that fall under the handouts. But the idea, this is our website, reshinstitute.com, and Shemin Resh Restore, because it is about restoration, and that's kind of what our work has been about and is about. So we invite you to consider the Train the Trainer. And then here's how to contact us, provide the Train the Trainer, workbooks, coaching, workshops, speaking, and program administration. And that is us, and that is it. So we want to take some questions now.
Did you want to show the video?
Well, let me do some questions first.
Okay.
I just want
We
to
have about
make
10
sure.
minutes or so.
We have 10 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'll do questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Question for you. Sorry, I work in Montgomery County, but I have Father Initiative Program housing.
I'm familiar with that. I used to work in Montgomery.
So long story short, one of the questions that keeps coming up from some of my guys, we have homework starting 6 o'clock tonight with 32 guys. Program for the focus for women, because we're doing cohort every single month. And I wanted to find out, so many of my guys are asking about cohorts for women or training for women. Do you get more of one than the other?
No. It's designed to be a 50-50.
What do you
So the question is about the applicability of this for women. It started in the women's program. So I started off just doing this for women. And the question was, now, the increase in women needing resources has increased. And that's great. And then we got the request about, well, what about the men? And then that's when I went, I said, let's do this together because I don't, and so I think, so it's applicable, the resources are all the same, the principles are all the same. We try to just emphasize today the fatherhood piece because we're at the fatherhood conference, but we also have motherhood examples, a lot of that as well. So I'd be happy to do, this for mothers, absolutely, and present to share that.
I'll be introducing that as they ask the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And the examples, most of the examples in each section have a father and a mother, as the example. So it's equal throughout. Thank you, good question.
My question was simple. It was just on the sites that you gave us. I was trying to write them down, but I was
No problem.
writing too slow. But if you can hit that one more time, I know it was 3 of them.
Sure.
Foresight, hindsight,
And insight.
insight. Could you start with the insight from?
Sure, the insight is the ability as things are happening to be able to kind of see what needs to be done in order to get yourself out of that situation. That's being insightful, okay? The sights you kind of can see like on a basketball court, right? You can see when somebody sees somebody open before they get open. Right? You're like, I didn't even realize I was open. The ball hit you in the head, right? Because they know you're open, but you don't even know you're open, right? And then there's those situations where, you may be trapped and you can't see out of it, and then all of a sudden you make a decision and it ends up being the proper decision because you can see, okay, this is how I get out of this situation that I'm already in. Foresight is the most blessed of gifts because it avoids turmoil and pain and trouble because you're able to have the solutions before the problems come up. For every problem, there's always a solution. There is no unsolvable problem because the problem arose because something was done improperly. So then reversing that and doing it properly will alleviate the problem. But if we can't figure out what we did wrong because we don't have that understanding, then we can't correct it. So those are the sights: insight, foresight, hindsight. We wanted to make sure we stressed is necessary, but it's the most painful of sights. Hindsight is 20/20, but it's painful. It means that you've already made the mistakes, and now you are going through what we call an inventory of positives and negatives, and you're seeing where it is that you went wrong. And that can take a very, very long time if you have gone very far down that road, right? Because if you go 10 miles down that road, the wrong road, it's 10 miles back, plus it's 10 miles back to the way you should have gone. So that's 20 miles. And so what we try to teach young brothers especially is, if you're going to make mistakes, you got to make them early. Because when you make those mistakes as an older man, your recovery process is very, very slow.
Get that man a hand.
Ouch.
Thank you.
Any questions online?
No questions online yet, but I was mistaken. We do have another 29 minutes left.
Okay, I'll take a couple questions and we'll play the video.
Do you tailor your wording and your approach to the training differently when you're working with a group of fathers versus a group of mothers? Or do you find that it's fairly universal how you're presenting? I know you said the examples are different, but like even in terms of how you two interact in front of those groups, or how the wording that you use and things like that, is it at all tailored differently between mothers and fathers? And then is it something that you can do with them together, like couples together in the room?
Good question. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so we definitely can tailor it for the audience. We think we're pretty good at reading a room. And so we can be secular or non-secular if we're dealing with an audience that we believe is kind of non-secular and it's not going to be offended by certain parables or proverbs we use, that we can do so. Now, I will be honest, everything we teach is based upon the good book. When we've gone into prisons, that has never been what we've taught them, because that's not necessary. We're trying to teach you the principles. We don't believe in it being religious. We're teaching you principles that are true principles. So it doesn't matter who wrote the principle or where it came from. Is 2 + 2 4?
Yes.
And if it is, that's what's relevant. So yes, we look forward to, tailoring it for the audiences that are presented, before us. So I can speak to women as well on their level, and she can speak to men as well. And we really enjoy, obviously, dealing with couples, because we know that is the greatest struggle, is remaining a couple.
Yeah. And there was one time I did a session for single parents. It was at Montgomery College, and this was and there were men and women. They weren't necessarily couples in this case, but I was able to use them in the activities, together, to get a man's perspective and a woman's perspective. In terms of, if this was a room full of women, we would probably be the same. It's really about the personalities of the group. If the personalities of the group want us to be more engaged, and sometimes they get up and laugh and they want to joke and play, then we'll joke and play. We can kind of navigate any.
Flexible.
And yeah, very flexible. You guys are pretty quiet.
Practitioners.
Yeah.
But if, it changes.
But very affirming.
Very-
I appreciate the head nods,
Yeah.
the acknowledgement when you hear something that resonates with you, and showing that. So I really do appreciate that.
And I think it's important, the consistency in the message and the presentation is a sign of respect. So I try not to present something because I think the audience wants that. We start off, and we just read and respond off of what the group is giving. But our interactions, especially I remember when we were in the prison, I thought it was very important that we presented ourselves a certain way, but that we weren't touchy. Because that's just not appropriate. That's not necessary. And it's not something that these people can do. They can't touch each other and they can't touch us in that, in that way. So it's also kind of just modeling what would be appropriate. Did that answer your question? Was that helpful?
Yeah. I was just curious if your language changed with men versus women, but it sounds like that's not. The content just stays the same.
Yeah, I mean, the scenarios and the examples are going to change.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, because it depends on what the group is experiencing. They're going to raise their hand. They're going to say, well, here was my situation. And so then we're going to go there.
Yeah.
And oftentimes if it's a group of women, I might talk more.
Okay.
But because he has perspective, he's also not going to not share. And so they, and sometimes they like hearing what he had to say, and vice versa.
They want to
Thank
know what a man is thinking, right?
Yeah.
They're like, well, what does the man think? Because they're interested in a man, right? So they want to know how to get that man. So.
Thank you. I just had a quick follow-up to that. Some of the cultural online spaces are having a lot of what's being called like the gender wars online. And some of the issues that particularly in this space folks are facing are some outdated notions of like gender roles. Like women should be in the kitchen and men should be providers. And so what I'm getting at is that some men have struggled with really respecting the full autonomy and thoughts behind women. And so if you're presenting to a room full of men, do you find that you need a man to be in the room to validate what you're saying? And if that gentleman is not in the room, how do you then tailor your presentation so that you are taken as a valid resource and not one that should be questioned or maybe dismissed because in their minds, you're a woman. What can a woman teach me as a man, as an example? I don't know if that's ever come up for you in any way, shape, or form. And how did you combat it or confront it? Thank you.
Great question. So when anyone comes to any kind of learning experience, they're looking for what they can get out of it. So the focus on any presentation or training or teaching is outcomes. What did you come to learn? And if I focus on the outcomes, I'm going to give you what you came to learn. Now, if I'm in a room full of some men, then I may be very straight. I may not smile, right? I have to be careful maybe not to give off anything that might seem questionable. I may not be as familiar, especially if it's a group I'm not as familiar with. So there are some boundaries. I may not come into the audience and speak to you and be, I may keep it very straight. So it depends on the setting. I don't feel uncomfortable. My husband always says, because I think I was 8 or 9 months pregnant, we went into the men's prison and we did the training. And I don't know, how many of you have gone behind bars and done training? Yeah. You used to be a teacher? Yeah. So it's, initially it might be a little intimidating. You're like, oh boy, you hear the gate close behind you, like, oh boy, okay, am I going to get stuck? But ultimately, it was just like, anywhere else. The people, they wanted us there. They wanted to hear, they wanted to know. So if the group is wanting it that way, then you're not going to have that much of a barrier. Now, the gender role piece is an issue. That is, you have some traditional and you have some where that needs to be kind of addressed. And we try to address that through modeling. First of all, just respect for one person to another. And then, yes, I do believe in the tradition of having the man as the head of the household, right? And so when we give those examples, we share that. What are some of the struggles? Well, I want to have this for dinner, but he wants to have that. How do we resolve that? I want to spend my money on this, but he wants to spend it on that. How do we resolve that? So getting real and honest about situations and scenarios kind of help that. I'll let you speak and then I want to say.
Yeah, we try to be upfront and honest with the audience. And so, yeah, when we're dealing with a situation where there's a group of women, obviously, and the women are looking for, some comfort. They're looking for someone that can identify totally with their experiences, right? Because they're mothers. They went through bringing forth these children. That's not my experience. I was there with all of my children when they came out, right? But I wasn't going through the same pain that my wife went through because she didn't take any medication. She was all natural. So that alone, when I tell them that, they understand they're dealing with a strong woman.
All right.
She didn't need pain medication to get our 7 children.
Bless you.
So they can respect that and say, what? Would you do that? Would you be willing to do that?
No twins?
No, but we got 2 sets born on the same day, just different years.
Wow.
That's those numbers.
So those are some of the examples that we do to kind of keep it real and let them know, like, it's about respecting. If we're dealing with a quote unquote faith-based audience, then we can always we can go to who was the first person to deliver the message when he was risen.
Right.
Where were the men?
Right.
Where were they? They were hiding.
Yeah,
Why?
that's true.
Because they were afraid.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like the shepherd and the sheep were what?
Scatter.
The women were on the front line.
Right.
Wow.
So those are things that, because you may have the same bravado in the faith-based community as well as the second,
Mhm.
right? So there are ways to navigate through that by keeping it real, but also not trying to disrespect a man's need to be a man. And my wife, she does that. She respects men. And so that comes through in her message.
Does that help?
Sure, yeah, thank you.
How y'all doing? I like the biblical nature and the spiritual reality behind your program. It's real powerful. My only question is, when it comes to, teaching these principles and stuff like that, as it says in the word that Jesus is the foundation, nobody can build upon that. When you're giving people principles, how do you ensure that you're also teaching them the foundation? Because if they don't believe in the foundation, then those principles are like building a house with no stone. So how do you make sure that you're still getting that across? And it might be politically incorrect, but still keeping true to the faith-based nature of your program.
Yeah, good question. My perspective is that, since we're dealing on a faith-based question, is that the book is a book of truth. It's a book of principles. It's not religious.
Mm-hmm.
Telling someone not to kill someone, murder someone is not religious.
Right.
Telling someone not to steal from someone, listen, this is mine, don't touch it. This is mine.
All right, sir.
Come on,
All
sir.
right,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Touch it.
Yeah.
All right, sir.
See,
Make
that's
it plain.
not religion. And so we make it very clear that these are principles that work. Now, if you ask us later on, where did we get them from? I'm not going to tell you that I am so smart that I was able to come up with those principles. Then I can share with you, I got it from here.
Your
Yeah.
source,
But wait a minute, you got it from here. It didn't sound like, because that's not what it's about. That's what it's been made to be about.
Right.
But it's just simply trying to tell you how to keep your behind out of hot water.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the Lazarus example you give? And then also, there was one time, I remember we were teaching, and he was asked that question, where did it come from? And he told them, the Bible, right? He said, and they were like, no, it's not. That's not in there. And, and then that to me is the beauty, because then he was able to show them, yeah, it is, look.
Because they asked, only because they asked.
Yeah.
Right? It's not forced.
They
it's
opened the door.
because you asked,
Yeah.
right? So I give the illustration of Lazarus. Everybody came to see Lazarus because of this great miracle. He was raised from the dead after 4 days. So everybody came to see him. But in coming to see him, they found the one who raised him.
Yeah.
So what they came for one thing,
Come on.
but they ended up leaving with more than
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
they planned for. And so if that's what happens, that's what happens. We're not trying to offend or proselytize.
Mm-hmm.
What you do is what you do. We're just simply still trying to show people who are parents and who want to become parents how to become better parents using principles.
And doing our job, which is to let our light shine, that men may see our good works and glorify him that's in heaven. We can't control what other people do. We're kind of walking out ours, and then from that, hopefully we can be that light.
You want to share the videos too, because it's about 16 minutes.
Oh, okay. No, it's 16 minutes long. We have 6 minutes left?
No, you've got about 15.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'm happy. Oh,
I just have one more.
no
Sorry,
problem.
hopefully it's
And
quick.
no questions online?
No questions online.
So yeah, I appreciate you guys sharing. Like, it depends on the audience that you're with, whether or not you share kind of where these principles come from. And I know we're just getting kind of a glimpse of the content that you guys have in this training. So I'm curious, because you mentioned that a personal principle that you both share as a couple is that the man is the head of the household. Is that something that you find is like a core to the content that you share? Like, does it come out as like a principle in the content that you share in the training?
No. Oh, sorry. Good question. No, it is not. It's, what comes across is the balance and respect for both
Excellent.
and the whole team.
Yes.
And I mean, if you happen to experience the curriculum or you get it and you see otherwise, let me know if there's a bias. But no, the idea is not to do that, because everybody's family situation is different. And so the idea is, and we know that a quick fix isn't gonna happen right now. So we're trying to instill these principles that will affect the next generation, or at least down the road, right? I mean, there's gonna be some immediate changes and some immediate improvements, of course. But this, like you said, the 10-mile loss, how long it took us to get lost, it's gonna take a little minute for everything to turn around. But we can start seeing measurable increase in changes and in behaviors just by awareness. I mean, the first step is just, I think this training, it can be done in like just information sessions or a full 27-hour program, right? Or you can build it out and put your workforce development pieces in there and build it to a 90-hour program. Like, it just depends on how it's designed to be flexible to what your needs are, and just incorporating all of these points into the framework. But it ultimately is going to take some time, and it should be balanced and be able to be used by whoever's in your group.
Right, and just in terms of, authorship, people write books, and people have messages they want to convey in their books. And it's funny because you'll have authors that'll be giving presentations, and they'll have audiences that have read their books. And the audience members will say, I read so-and-so and so-and-so, and I got out of that so-and-so and so-and-so. And they'll ask the author, is that what you wrote? Is that what you meant? The author's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not what I wrote. So people read into things that are not actually there. If that helps you, good for you, but that wasn't the intent. So our intent is to reach all groups, be they secular or non-secular. We just simply don't believe we have to change a principle that works because you don't believe in the one who created the principle.
Yeah.
So if the principle works for you, then it works for you. You get the benefit whether you believed or not.
Okay.
So we're gonna play this video.
And I'm gonna play the video. Ashley from online says, no questions. The conversations are going great. Well, good questions, and they're great information. So that's your
Okay,
content.
wonderful, thank you, Ash. So this is a video, like I said, it's just a Zoom session. We invited some people, we just had a Zoom session, and this is on a clip from the routine of that. And so we just wanted to share with you so that you can not only see part of the training, part of some of the content, but also see how it could be delivered if you had to do something on Zoom. But as you can tell, we prefer in person, but we both know how to use Zoom. Okay, hi, we are back again. We are here to cover the letter R, which represents routine. This is our third competency in the series of 7. They are listed behind me. Provide, attitude, routine, educate, nurture, teamwork, and safety. These are the parenting, the life skills competencies in the context of parenting that we hope you will embrace and apply in your everyday life. Today, we're going to talk about routine, which is the order and method in which we go about performing a task, such as getting ready for work or getting ready for today's webinar. So I am Marcy, and
I am Kirk.
And together we are the co-authors of Parents, Life Skills, Literacy, and Leadership, and this curriculum. And so we're going to talk we're going to read to you some of the content in our workbook that is for parents, the participants adults, young and old, who want to reskill or revisit some life skills in the context of parenting that they can then apply within their own families. So we're going to start with reading a scenario, give you a chance to get familiar with two parents and see what you think about their routine. And then we're going to let you talk about it. And then we'll talk a little bit more about some guidance and principles on routine.
Okay, so routine. Here's the scenario. Rodney's mother never read to him before bedtime or bathed him regularly. When he and Rochelle had little Russell, they did not know about a bedtime routine. When little Russell wouldn't go to sleep when they wanted him to, they just let him fall asleep to the TV or iPad or video. They found it difficult to wake him up on time for school. Rodney would be frustrated because he'd be late for school and have trouble paying attention in class. So the question is, are they providing structure for the child? Yes or no? If yes, how do you know? If no, what should Rodney and Rochelle do to improve?
And what they might do to improve. So Danielle chimed in and said no, that the first answer is no. So she thinks they're not providing structure for the child. So let's look at some ideas. So if we're saying no, so what could Rodney and Rochelle do to improve? And you may have your own list of ideas. Oh, we already have one. Set up a schedule. Let me see here what we got. Set up a schedule. Set up a schedule routine.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I see it. There we go.
I think Rodney could be overly stimulated too. It's bedtime and the TV's gone or the iPad or whatever the case may be. So like Danielle said, maybe a schedule to ease him into calming and simmering down for the evening, as opposed to having that mind constantly engaged, trying to figure out what the plot is or what the next move is in the video game.
Good point. Good, very good observation. So some other ideas you might, well, in the workbook, there are some options you can choose from, sort of along the lines of scheduling. Pick a time for Russell to go to bed. So setting a schedule, writing a list of what he should do before bed. That helps with preparing a routine, sort of listing out what needs to be done before we go to bed. Checking to see if his bed is comfortable. I mean, is it a hard bed? Does he need a new mattress maybe? Is it uncomfortable? And sometimes when we make these routines, and then obviously it does say there to make a bedtime routine and checklist. And sometimes that checklist can be part of the child making the checklist and the parents having a checklist as well, because there may be some things that we need to do as adults to help us to prepare our children to go to bed. And we have another chat in here, another comment from Danielle that I want to read. It says, no screens 2 hours before bed. She's responding to Dawn's message. No screens 2 hours before bed. Reading at least 20 minutes before bed.
That's a good one.
Bathing, set up clothes for the next day before going to sleep. Parents should model this behavior as well. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I wish I could give you a treat. That was excellent. Very good. And Dawn agrees. Wonderful. And so I want to take this opportunity to introduce to you Donna Roberson, who is going to be a part of this parenting program, because she is our coach. So her role is to help you if you struggle with setting up a routine, or you're wanting to get comfortable with your scheduling, and she's going to provide some support after the workshops. And so you can schedule some one-on-one time and actually get some support with actually scheduling those routines and getting working out some of the barriers, problem solving, etc.
And giving you suggestions like she just gave about, overstimulation, understimulation, helping you identify where your child might be in that as we get ready for bed. So one of the other points here is, what additional information do you need to better help Rodney and Rochelle's situation? Is there anything else you think we might need to know or consider in about Rodney and Rochelle?
How about the hours for school? What time does he need to get up and
Okay.
get ready? And maybe even how does he travel? Does he need time, extra time to walk or to catch the bus? Danielle had a comment. Trouble focusing, eating healthy. Yep.
Mhm.
So,
Very good.
Right, no sugary snacks before going to bed, right?
right.
Right.
And what time are they trying to get him down? Is he going down at 7 or is he going down at 10? I don't know. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, excellent. These are all, and I would also, does it say how old Rodney is? So the age, makes a difference, because depending on the age, younger children need a certain amount of hours of sleep, and then it kind of goes in and goes up again. As you get older, the amount of hours you need for sleep reduces. Like when you're in high school versus when you're in elementary school, you're going to need more hours when you're younger. So I'm curious, I imagine he's a young child, but we want to know and it's interesting because there's been a lot of discussion over the last several years on high school and bell times, because high school students, it's presumed that, they don't need as much sleep, so we can start them at high school at 7:30 in the morning. Whereas, more information has been presented letting us know that even high schoolers still need that time, extra time for sleep, especially if they're working late, doing homework, and et cetera. So we want to be considerate that depending on not only the age and stage of the child, but wherever they are developmentally, it's okay to not be stuck in a certain amount of hours that the child needs. The child needs the amount of sleep that the child needs to be productive and to be healthy. So it may change throughout the different periods of the child's life.
Right, that screen time, as both of you mentioned, is extremely important. Considering collecting, all the devices, prior to, going to bed, because, you can go in the room and, it's a light on in the room, and it's the computer, and it's because, the child is up. They say Fortnite was like the worst thing for children because they weren't literally going to bed. They would go to bed at 5 in the morning and then have to get up to go to school. So if it means, taking away that at night, then that's something also to consider as part of the routine. Okay, by this time I need you to give me your computer or your iPad or whatever.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to read to you the guidance for routine. I'm on page 34. So this just gives us some context. So routine, as I mentioned, is the order and method in which we go about performing a task, such as getting ready for work. The routine of the sun's rising and setting is an example of order in the universe. The Earth's routines and rhythms are ordered by the sun and the moon. Just as the sun's routine is ordered to perfectly meet the needs of the Earth, a parent's routine is ordered to provide the needs of the children. Routines deliver expectations and provide security and stability in a child's world. Routines are simply routes or paths that you take repeatedly. So there are some required routines, and they do vary by the child's age and family needs. Bedtime routines, which is what we've just been talking about. Typically, a bedtime routine might take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, and it'll depend on what's needed for your child or children. Travel routine, as you all mentioned, are we taking car, bus, train? Do we have alternative routes? And a morning routine, approximately an hour to 2 hours for a morning routine. so that we can have time to make adjustments and have time to be comfortable in that routine. Sometimes rushing through those routines consistently, that also creates agitation. So we want to be mindful of that. The other comment I'll make is sometimes as adults, when we talk about adult life skills and repetition, as I mentioned here, routines or routes or paths that you take repeatedly. And so it's really important that we recognize that a routine is something that is consistently and done every single day. And some adults are really good at that, and some adults are not. And so it's important to recognize where you are, where you fall on that spectrum of being able to implement these routines, and identify if you need help with implementing your routines on a consistent basis, because the goal is to get that consistency for the child. Is there anything you wanted to talk about in terms of?
Like you said, routine is the routes that, that you take, and routines. There's a proverb that says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart." It's that training, and you have to have a dedicated routine in order for them to be comfortable in what it is that they're going to do. It shouldn't be left to really the chance. They're either going to have a positive routine or a negative routine, right? The routine that doesn't work is still a routine, it's just ineffective, right? So we want the routine to be a positive one that gets positive results, because all habits are just that, they're habits. They're going to be good or bad,
right?
And so we have to try to train them or dedicate them to the positive one, so that they can not have the anxiety going to school, right?
Right. And this reminds me, do you remember when we used to teach parents in the prisons, and there was this, well, multiple occasions, but this one particular, we heard it over and over, the gentlemen in particular, not so much the women, but the men would say how they didn't have a routine. Like when they came home from school, there wasn't this sort of, okay, you're coming from school, time to do your homework or time to have a snack. It was like they came home from school and they just did whatever, they wanted to do. And that consistency is something that they never experienced as a child. And so that always stuck with me, because that was something that was very, it's indicate that structure, as much as we, there is a lot of free parenting sort of approaches out now that talk about or don't value structure as much. I mean, certainly there should be a balance, and the amount of structure that you give changes based upon the child's responses and needs. But in general, there should be some structure and some around the child's time.
And when you think in terms of structure, I mean, what is structure? A structure is a building, right? So that's what you're doing, giving structure to build them up, right? To construct the type of, positive person that you're trying to raise, so that they won't be dependent upon you, right? They won't be dependent upon you when they have a structure. If they don't have a structure, then that's why they're going to be very, very dependent to come to you to ask you, what should I do next? The structure, the routine takes you out of the equation, and it frees you up to be able to do some other things as well.
Can I piggyback on your comment? That structure, I guess, would be the child that we're creating for the child, and the parent could be like the scaffold. So if you kind of fall, I'm here to catch you and kind of put you back in place. Like when they're building a building, they have the scaffolds around them. So that's the image I got when you were speaking.
And it's always temporary, right? The scaffolding is temporary.
Right.
Once the building is able to stand on its own, you remove the scaffolding. You don't continue to be the hover parent. So very good point.
Excellent. And I see a message in the chat. It says, oh, this was, okay, gotcha. Yeah, we're talking about sleep. Sleep determines, when we're talking about routines and how much sleep you need, it changes depending on the time of the year. You might need more sleep in the winter, colder months, less sleep in the summer, warmer months. So thank you. All of these things are really important points and considerations.